Welcome to another Lore You Should Know. I am Greg Tito, and this is the segment where we jump into specific parts of Dungeons & Dragons lore for you to use in your game, or just because it's fun to know these things. I am joined by Wes Schneider. Hi, Wes.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We are going to be talking about one of the domains of dread that is described in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which comes out on May 18th and is a compendium of all ways to run horror using Dungeons and Dragons, and that includes different domains of dread. And this one is about Hazlan, which is an interesting one because it encompasses so many different parts of horror and Dungeons and Dragons. So, Wes, why don't you give us kind of the overview of what's happening in Hazlan?
So one of the things that we wanted to do with all of the domains in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft is we didn't want to just explore a type of horror or various types of horror. We really wanted to highlight D&D horror. Like, what are the horror stories that really only high fantasy, D&D, like the stories around your table, what are those stories that only you can tell with RPGs like this? So this is where the domain of Hazlan came up, because in the past, Hazlan was a domain that was ruled over by the wizard Hazlic. And Hazlic is straight up from the Forgotten Realms. He's a red wizard of Fae. And he did things that were terrible even by red wizard standards and managed to get himself a domain of dread pulled into Ravenloft and having an entire domain formed around him.
That's a tough thing to do, to be able to even piss off Saztam is hard.
Yes, seriously. So Hazlic was always presented as an outcast, as an evil wizard, and then he got a domain that in the past was presented as it's a magical domain, there is a wizard in charge, wizard tyranny. And that was pretty much it, which fundamentally is a creepy thing. But with Van Richten's Guide, we really wanted to lean into that. What is the horror story that comes out of a wizard did it? What is the horror story that comes out of I'm a D&D player, I am reliant on magic, and it doesn't work right anymore, or it's not under my control, or even the entire environment is magical and that has made it malicious in some way.
Creepy. So it's kind of as if Raistlin didn't have all that drama, right? Like, it's just like, all right, here's evil wizard let loose and playing with that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many stories of like, a moral wizard did it. Like, why is there an owlbear? It was a wizard. Why did this thing happen? It was a wizard. This is this thrown into one domain and really taken up to 11.
All right, so what does that look like when players arrive on Hazlan?
It's a mess. Perfectly true. Like, perfectly honestly, everything that could magically have gone wrong in Hazlan has. So this is a domain where as soon as you look at the map for this, it is apparent even from just the map, just from looking at all the different places, that things have gone real wrong here.
What are some examples? What's gone wrong? What did you see?
Well, we've got a few different things. We've got an entire edge of the map called the Seething, which is literally falling apart, like the world is crumbling into nothingness. There's, in the middle of the map, a vast area where the mists have actually broken through the middle of the domain called the Lacuna, and it is stretching out and encompassing or devouring portions of the domain. There are giant sigils that have been created by wizards attempting to tap into the magic of the land that scar the landscape. And then there's just a ton of other things that shouldn't be here. An entire petrified forest, a section of the caverns from deep underground that have been like literally cored up into like a mesa, a plane where meteors crash regularly, bringing all measures of horrors with them, etc.
Wow. All right. So I'm getting some. Forgive the dated reference, but World of Warcraft Burning Crusade kind of vibes in here, right? Where like the edges of the world are visible and distinct, but then also there's horrible things crashing in and wreaking havoc across it.
This is one of the domains where so many of the domains of dread have this sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, everything's normal here vibe to them. And the people are very much just like, yes, this is normal life. Things are fine. That's not so much the case in Hazlan. In Hazlan, since there is a high population of wizards here, the pretty much ability to cast spells immediately puts you at a higher level than anybody who does not have the ability to cast spells. You have groups of immoral wizards that are encouraged by Hazlitt to plumb the depths of magic, to really like test the boundaries of what can be done, to explore all manner of amoral science and wizardry, completely heedless of the ramifications, and the ramifications are literally destroying the domain.
Wow. Right. So it's got this element of, kind of environmental hazards gone awry, right? So it's, I wouldn't necessarily put films like Twister or other kind of disaster horror, in a D&D setting, but this is perfectly that, right? Like that's like here we're trying to figure out, and maybe even that's a hook that dungeon masters can use for their player characters is like, you need to go into Hazlan and figure out what's happening and how to stop it and what's going on.
Actually, Twister is a fantastic example because Twister brings with it the concept that it's the same hurricane, what killed my dad, and it like even growls and whatnot. Like, watch that movie again. It's just like, hold on, are you saying this this tornado has a personality? That would be perfect for Hazlan.
Yes. We'll get Bill Paxton to star. It'll be great.
Nice.
There's a cow. I think you mentioned a cow thing too, right? That's such a. All right. So the amoral wizards that you talked about, are those other visitors to this, or are those people who are just trapped in this domain were similar to Hazlitt?
So Hazlitt has set up a whole magocracy where it's just like, I'm a wizard, so wizards are better than everybody, and anyone who isn't a wizard, well, they're probably good for something. Let's find out what they're good for. So you have this immediate like bizarre stratification between Hazlitt at the top as this wizard overlord, all of his varied apprentices, who pretty much everybody who can cast magic is tied in with him, whether as an apprentice or some other servant, which is not a great gig to have, but sure is better than living in these towns where there's not enough food, there's not enough water, they're being plagued by, various monsters or like bizarre magical weather or other disasters. And they're in the wizard class here is encouraged to keep their overlord interested, to prove their value, and to compete with one another. And that's part of why the domain as a whole is suffering from these over-the-top disasters again and again, because you have this entire class of super-powered wizards who are trying to retain their status and their favor of the Dark Lord of the domain by being like, look, I did a thing. That's what you wanted, right? You're interested, right? You think I'm valuable. So it's this whole system that perpetuates these disasters. And then people or visitors get caught in the middle. Or in some cases, if you're a wizard or a sorcerer or somebody with magical power that catches these wizards' fancy, oh, you're like us. Come on into our horrible society.
So that brings up an interesting thought for me, which is kind of throughout all of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. It's like, who are the people who live here? Are they actual people? Are they souls that have somehow been trapped in this afterlife-esque, entrapment zone, or are they made up? Are they not even real? Are they just, figments of the Dark Lord's imagination?
So the short answer to that is yes.
I knew you were going to say that.
So the dark powers are very much in control of every aspect of reality here. And what the dark powers are, what their agendas are, what they're seeking to do, that's very much up to you as the DM. But the ultimate goal is to tell a good horror story, to make it creepy and impactful. So we have a whole discussion about what are the dark powers, how can you use them, but then also the individuals in the domains of dread, are they just like the trees and the animals? Were they created by the dark powers? Are they actual individuals? Are they people that have been traumatized and are forced to live here and get reincarnated again and again? Or are they visitors and people from outside the domains of dread that are every bit as much real people as the player characters and whatnot? All of these are possibilities, and all of these are set up for DMs to explore in the creepiest ways possible. So at no point are we like 87% of people in this domain are like this, or this. Like, we don't get into that. We set that up for you to tell the story that feels creepiest for you and your group.
I see. So it's a little bit like, here are the tools, tell the stories that you want to tell.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I think it's important for folks to realize that when you're talking about dark powers, you're not talking about the Dark Lords. The Dark Lords are the ones who aren't in charge of each one of these domains, but the dark powers is kind of this nebulous, evil entities.
Yes, absolutely. All of the Dark Lords of Ravenloft are imprisoned within their domains, and their wardens are this mysterious cadre of powerful, sinister forces. And what their agendas are, entirely up to you. Like I said, we've got a lengthy discussion about how that can influence the stories that you create when you're playing in Ravenloft. But if one of those options is, if you don't want to engage with that, if you just want to focus on, here's my vampire story, here's my werewolf story, whatever have you, you can absolutely do that.
Nice. Well, I think maybe it's wrong to insert this, but I think the dark powers is like, our conception of religion here in our world. So maybe that's what this is all about. Is just, I mean, I've been seeing a lot of D&D players online talk about like campaigns around killing God or having this type of thing, and I don't know if that feels like having an overarching meta story about that while going to these different domains could be really, really interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, I Curse of Strahd is a perfect example where if you want to tell one story, make a whole campaign out of it, and have it happen in one domain, these domains are rich enough to get an entire campaign or multiple campaigns worth of experience out of. But if you want to go globe trotting, if you want to go to every one of the domains and reveal the deeper, really conspiracy behind it all, you can absolutely do that. And
yeah, and maybe Hazlan can be a part where you're really investigating that meta nature, right? Because it's so magical and infused with, making stuff up because it's magic, and then you can see a little bit behind the curtain there and understand who is actually really controlling who.
Absolutely. And characters, when you make that shift between, oh, it's a creepy wizard, to, oh, all of reality is actually manipulated by these sinister forces that are malicious and we're all puppets and all of that, that's quite a shift, but can be really exciting.
Yes. What is that? Cabin in the Woods. There it is. That's what you can play with your horror stories here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a built-in meta narrative.
So one last question on Hazlitt, because he seems like someone who could be a conduit for storytelling about other wizards and apprentices. There's lots of tropes around them taking over. Is there a political nature to what's happening in Hazlan as well, where you can work with his various lieutenants and try to overthrow him as Dark Lord?
Absolutely. You can definitely go that direction, because Hazlitt, one of his big elements is when he became Dark Lord, part of the way that the dark powers torment him, like every Dark Lord is tormented by the dark powers in some way. Like nobody's loving life as a Dark Lord in the Domains of Dread. Hazlan has had his magical ability stunted. He can't learn new spells. He can't be the magical experimenter that he was previously, and through some of his experiments ultimately won him a place in the Domains of Dread. So he touts himself as the most powerful wizard in the domain, but his apprentices are constantly outstripping him. So he needs to pit them against each other to keep control of things. Hazlitt's other element is that Hazlitt, as a Red Wizard of Thay, is covered in tattoos. And the dark powers have invested his tattoos with this magic that allows him to see through any other symbol that are like his tattoos. So it's a symbol called the Eye of Hazlitt, and anybody in the domain that has this on, an amulet or has it on a building or whatever have you, Hazlitt can see through that. So there's this totalitarian element to it, but that also allows Hazlitt to keep an eye on, all right, what are my apprentices doing? Like, what are the other people doing? Is there a better wizard in here? So in his paranoia, watches over the entire domain for rivals and either tries to edge them out, destroy them, or turn him to his side, pushing them to do further horrible things in his already suffering domain.
I like the 1984 Winston Smith kind of thing going on here too. Like that's super fun and creepy to play with as well.
Yeah,
great,
absolutely,
awesome. Well, I can't wait for more folks to get into Hazlan and all the other domains of dread we're talking about here in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft on May 18th. Wes, how can people get in touch with you? Maybe ask you some questions about what's happening with all these domains.
Oh, sure. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm on there at FWesSchneider. Feel free to give me a yell, and if I can say something, happy to talk more.
Exciting. Awesome. Great. Well, I'm really, really interested in you creeping everyone out. So please only respond to people as a dark power going forward if you can.
Easy. Duh. Already doing it. Not a problem.
Awesome. Thank you, Wes.
Well, thanks for having me.